You know, most people who know me realize that I show up and I've usually got a story or two to tell, most of them with a point, but almost every single one of them brings a smile to your face. Not today. See, a couple of weeks ago, I got a phone call from a good friend of mine, Chuck. And he said, "Hey, why don't you and Chris join us for lunch today?" Chuck and his wife Hillary are great people, so we decided, sure, why not? We got to his house, we found out that it wasn't going to be a typical lunch, but rather it was going to be a celebration of life for Mike, a dear friend of ours who's dying. About 10 minutes after we got there, Mike arrived, and it took him 5 minutes to walk into the house, bent over, the oxygen tank hanging from his shoulder. Still, when he walked in, he had a big smile on his face. He gave everybody a hug and kissed us on the cheek. So we sat down for lunch. Now, the two ladies that were with Mike, the caretakers for hospice, asked if they could say grace. And when they were done, Mike said, "I'd like to say something." And he said, "You know, I've never done this before. I've never died." And then he said, "What a wonderful adventure. And I'm so happy to be able to share at least this part of it with all of you." Now, lunch was over, and he turned to Chuck and he said, "Hey, Chuck, do you mind if I ride Milagro one more time?" See, Mike's a horseman. Always has been. And he was integral in arranging the breeding of Milagro. So over the objection of the two ladies from hospice who said it was way too dangerous, and I thought to myself, how could it be dangerous? The man's dying. We took Mike out to the paddock area. He was so weak. I mean, he's lost 60 pounds in the last month or so. I had to pick him up and place him in the saddle. And then I held on to him, carrying his oxygen tank, as we walked slowly around the paddock one time. It exhausted him. I then lifted him off the horse, took him over to a bench that Chuck has by the barn, and put him down. My wife, who's a nurse, went over to make sure he was okay, and Mike bent forward and just started crying. And he said, "Thank you. All I wanted was to ride him just one more time." Isn't it time you and I stepped back from where we are, looking at things from a different perspective, and start wondering about those things that annoy us, perturb us? I had a guy who pulled in front of me on the highway today. My son or daughter came home 20 minutes late from curfew. You know, all the way home tonight, the sun was in my eyes. It made it just a horrible glare. Or the infamous, "What, dinner's late again?" How insignificant our problems. That day at lunch, Mike sat across the table from me, his daughter on that side, his granddaughter on that side. He's gone now. What do you think he'd give to be able to see his granddaughter or his daughter? To have that sun shining in his eyes? to sit down and enjoy a meal again. It's about time we take a look at things and we start changing our thinking. We start being more grateful for everything around us. Because, like it or not, all of us, one of these days, will be Mike.